Hey guys, it's Sign here with Hobbies and Man, and we're going to be doing something that I haven't done in a while, which is a light novel review. So today we'll be looking at Her Majesty's Swarm, Volume 1 by 616 Special Info Battalion, published by J Novel Club, as you guys can see right there on the side. And this seems to be not that well in terms of printing quality, or it's not printed well. It has some quality control issues. However, none of the other volumes that I have happen to have this issue. So I think it was a specific situation dealing with this specific volume, and not necessarily J Novel Club's books in general, right? So that's kind of sad, but it is what it is. It's not that big a deal. It is mostly just like things that I noticed that bother me, not necessarily like causing issues in terms of readability of this book. So yeah, and the demographic here is suitable for older teens, so we'll call that teen plus, probably 16 plus. And the genres here are isekai, game lit, in the sense that there's game mechanics, but they're not the key component of the story, which would be something more like lit RPG. This is like a game is part of the plot line. And fantasy, because most game lit stories are fantasy based. And it does not have an adaptation as far as I'm aware. I don't really see this getting an adaptation because of the really concerning or maybe kind of like dark like situations that happen in this book. So I don't really see it getting a series, but it is more or less similar to I'm a Spider, So What? So this is like a more adult version of that. And it's kind of like a kingdom building story. So yeah, and the ratings, the rating for this is a 4 out of 5. I liked it. I thought it was good. I really enjoyed some aspects of it, but because of the story and the things that the characters do, I can't really say I want to give it a 5 out of 5 because it makes me kind of uncomfortable to an extent. And I think that's good because it like works really well for the story, but it doesn't make me feel good while reading it. So yeah. And the premise here is that this girl gets isekai. We don't know her name. We don't know anything about her really, except that she likes this game. And she gets isekai to this world alongside the characters that she used to play in this game, and this like real-time strategy game that she played. And so she decides to take over the world because she is now tied to the like biological urges of this race of things that she brought with her. And so she is basically one of them and has the same like needs as them. And so they decide to take over the world. And it's really well done. Like I really enjoy the thought process put in here, and the way that the author doesn't shy away from the horrors that this inspires. But it doesn't make it difficult to read sometimes. I wasn't necessarily uncomfortable with it, but I definitely think that a lot of people might be. So that's why I keep mentioning that. So yeah, let's look at the plot line here. Basically, this is a justified evil type of story, except that it's not exactly like super justified. Like it is justified to an extent, and then it blows out of proportion and it gets really like bad, right? So yeah. So let's talk about it. It's rough, but it's good, right? So we get introduced to the main character very vaguely. She gets isekai randomly. They just kind of like go to sleep and wake up in another world. And then they settle into this new world, very general isekai stuff. They realize, okay, I'm in this new world. This world is similar to this game world that I used to play, but not exactly the same. And I have these monsters with me, the swarm, which are these like bug insect things. And I'm connected with them, right? And so she goes through all of this. She learns all of this stuff. And then she realizes that she can use her swarm the same way she could in the game. And it's really interesting because the game mechanics don't happen in her real life. They only happen in her head. But because she's always in her head, we can kind of think of them as happening in the real world. So it's kind of confusing, but it works really nicely. I think it's good. It's very different from your usual isekai fare, where like the character gets like a game screen, right? Like there is no game screens here. The character is just so used to the game that to her it feels like the game, even though it's actually not, right? So I like that. I thought that was good. Then we meet some friendlies, some elves that live in this forest where the queen and her swarm manage to appear. They become friends with the elves. And then they learn that there's poachers and slavers, and so they fight them because they tried to hurt the elves. And then they establish a base. They establish a source of income, which is from the city called Lean. That is where the slaver came from. And then a tragedy strikes. So one of the elves gets killed, and then this is the impetus for this like holy war that the swarm goes on, right? And so they're like, okay, these people are prejudiced and evil, and they mistreat the elves. They killed one of the elves who was my friend, and so in retaliation, I'm gonna destroy their kingdom and kill everyone in it. So she goes on this like genocide, and it's really rough because like on one hand, you understand where the character is coming from, and on the other hand, the author makes sure to show you that yes, these people are like prejudiced and have problems, but they're also regular people, and they're also nice to each other, and they also have children and love and things, and the main character doesn't care. She just like destroys them. She like sends waves and waves of her ant characters, and all she cares about is revenge and victory and making sure that she can get more units out of it. So everyone has to die so that she can make more ants, right? Or spiders. And it's like horrifying, but also like I can't look away. It has that kind of feeling to it, and I find that to be really, really interesting and compelling, right? So and so she goes on this massive campaign. Most of the book is actually this campaign, and it ends when they accomplish their goal. They remove the country. They only leave about 20 people alive, and these people are then turned into like servants for Her Majesty and her swarm, right? So this is where the story ends. However, for some reason, the author decided that the good stopping point was not good enough, and so they made a few extra chapters that detail how the other countries reacted to the situation. Now, to an extent, it makes sense. I want to wrap up the whole thing clearly where you get to see the situation and you get to see the reaction of all the characters, right? But it makes it less good for the reader because there was like this perfect place to end, and then the story continues. And it's like, okay, I already got my satisfaction. I already got my moment of like, okay, the story ended, and then I still have to keep reading. That's kind of annoying, right? So I think the author should have actually interwoven those last chapters showing us how the other three countries react to the fall of the kingdom of Malak throughout that campaign instead of at the end of it. And that would have been a much more like satisfying way of looking at things, because that way the story ends when the campaign ends and we're over. Like there's nothing extra to talk about, right? So I think that would have been good, but they chose not to do it that way, and they kind of like bumps it down a little bit, right? So yeah, there's also this big twist where like a character appears, and the thing is that the character that appears is actually like described like this. So the whole book I was reading, and I thought that this was, Her Majesty, but it actually is not. It's this character that gets introduced later who happens to be some sort of god character, and that makes sense because isekai always has to have god characters, right? So I'm confused because this character is the one that shows up in all of the covers, or most of the covers. So does the god character look like the Majesty character, or does the Majesty character look like the god character, or are they just different but they happen to look very similar? I'm not really sure. And it did cause me a little bit of confusion, especially because there's no images here, so it's hard to know what the characters look like, right? So yeah, overall, good stuff. I liked it. In terms of characters, we have the main character who eventually gets the name of Gravilia, which is a spider flower. Then we have Lysa, who is the elf character that survives, and she becomes important at the very end of the story. We have the village elder for the elves. I don't know his name. We have a bunch of human characters. None of them are important because most of them die, but there's the king of Malak, there's the princess, the husband of the princess, whose name is Stefan Stroganoff, I think. And there's a few other characters like that, but they're not really all that important. And then we have Sarigran, or Sarinan, something like that, who is the main mob character. So like, if the queen is like the main character, the knight Sarigan is like her lieutenant, like her second in command, and they also happen to have individuality compared to all the other mob characters, and so they happen to be like our second main character, right? And I actually really like them. I think it's really, really cute. It reminds me of Darkness from Konosuba, but without the pain aspect, like the masochism aspect. So I like that character a lot. In terms of world building, we have kind of your standard medieval fantasy. There's standard fantasy discrimination where the humans don't like the elves and the elves don't like the humans, and the dwarves hate both of them and stuff like that. And then we have this video game mechanic that only happens in the main character's head. Everything else is kind of like the real world. There's these COD characters that we get introduced to, but don't really do anything in the story. And we get introduced to like the religion of this world, which is the God of Light religion, which is basically just Christianity but slightly different. That's basically it. We also learn that the other kind of major factions of the world from the main character's video game also exist here, but just not in the same way, not exactly the same way. And so that's important for later on, right? For later stories. In terms of artwork and fan service, there's no artwork and there's no fan service. And I don't really mind the fan service aspect because I don't think it fits anywhere here. But I'm really sad that there's no art. But at the same time, I think I understand after reading this, which is this story is not going to appeal to the mass audience. This is more of a dark revenge story. This is kind of more of I don't know. This does not have mass appeal because it is very much from the bad guy's perspective, and the bad guy actually manages to do bad things, right? So I understand why they wouldn't really want to spend money making high quality illustration for this when it might not sell that well. But at the same time, I feel like 1 or 2 illustrations would have gone a long way, and I really wish that they had them, but they don't. So that kind of sucks. And in terms of rating, 4 out of 5. It's not for everyone. It's really dark, and there's like it is very honest about what it's doing. Like this is a character that happens to be the queen of this ant colony that happens to actually be spiders, like the spider colony. They all are a hive mind, and because of this, she is no longer human. She is a monster, and her actions show that she's a monster, and she has no problem doing these things. And so, like, she's not a hero character. She is just our perspective character. And it allows the character to really do dark, horrible things. And it's not for everyone, right? So you might be uncomfortable with reading this, so I don't recommend it for everyone. But there you go. Really good story. I actually really enjoyed it, even though it did make me uncomfortable sometimes. I was like, oh, that's really fucked up. I don't know if I like that part of it, but everything else was great. I really enjoyed the narration. It really reminded me of Funa, where the character is like cutesy, but also kind of apathetic, and also very pragmatic in the sense that they're like, okay, this is a video game world. I am gonna die if I don't do the things that I need to do, but also there's a certain detachment that they have from this world, right? And so it reminds me of that, but it does go very dark. So there you go. Overall, good stuff. And those are my thoughts on Her Majesty's Swarm Volume 1. I have 3 more volumes, and I'm definitely going to read them. I just don't know when. And there you go. So thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you guys later.